Hello, this is Ryanne Davis, and this is a continuation of my second submission for the Associate Trainer program, where I will be talking about my ride today with Ariel. So you just saw the groundwork session that we had, and here is the mounted work. So I get on and right away start off in the walk, and again she's going to start off a little bit slow here as she starts to warm up to carrying my weight, and then as she warms up you'll see that everything is going to improve, and we're actually going to begin the sitting the trot process today, and so I'll show you guys how I do that. And so here we just warm up in the walk again. We do a little bit of a leg yield. You know, I never am gonna ask her for any big things. You know, I'm very gradual, and I try to be as fair as possible to my horse. You know, if she's a little bit stiffer today than she was yesterday, you know, I have to allow for that if I'm gonna be fair to my horse. So, you know, I just focus on stretching myself up and finding my own balance up there as a rider, to try to help the horse out rather than trying to ask her to do all this work when I'm not even balanced myself as a rider. How's she supposed to balance if I'm not balanced? So we just take our time here in the walk and just loosen up a little bit, even though she did just have a warm-up just before this. That doesn't mean that she's warmed up with carrying my weight on top of her. So you can see here she's starting to develop a nice walk here, where she's really starting to use the forelegs evenly and not rushing, which this horse, like I think I mentioned in the previous lunging video, she can get really rushy in the walk, especially with a rider. She doesn't like to walk, because again, it's the, you know, each leg has to pull its own weight, and so it's more difficult for her to walk. So I really am looking for a nice slow, and really a genuine walk from this horse, which is again difficult for her. So you can see that she's stretching out really nicely. She's calm. She's not running around, which if you refer back to my first submission, you will see that that is not how this horse started off. She started off very fast and, you know, kind of a drunken sailor. You couldn't really steer her anywhere. You couldn't, you know, you were just kind of, it was like being in a sports car with a teenager. The brakes didn't work, the gas didn't work, or it was too sensitive or not enough, and it was not very fun to ride this horse. But nowadays she is very, very easy to ride. As you can see, she just flows along here, which is what this work is all about. It's all about showing the horse that riding can be easy and it can be fun and relaxing for the horse, and it doesn't have to be this, you know, dreaded, difficult thing that it often is with riders who don't stretch their horses over their backs. So here we get started in the trot, which is her favorite. And you can see she's got a nice bounce starting to develop here. You can see her tail switches from side to side, which really demonstrates to me that the spine is beginning to loosen up, because the tail is the very end of the spine, and so it really can illustrate what's going on in the spine. If the tail isn't moving, then the spine probably isn't very loose. If they're clamping their tail to their body, then that also can reflect the spine, and the head and neck is obviously the opposite end of the spine as the tail, and so these two ends tend to loosen up pretty simultaneously. So if one end is stiff, and the other end is probably going to be stiff and equally as stiff. So if they're clamped in the tail, they're probably going to be clamped in the poll as well, which this horse was very severely clamped in the poll. And as an Arab, I think she kind of got away with having this higher tail set and didn't necessarily clamp her tail, but that's just, confirmation rather than actually good training. And it doesn't actually necessarily mean that if she wasn't an Arab, that her tail wouldn't be clamped to her body. So, but anyway, this horse isn't clamped, and you can see she doesn't go behind the vertical anymore. She pokes her nose nice and out forward, which is what I'm looking for. If they're dipping behind the vertical at any point, something is wrong. Either my hands are too strong, or they're not being communicative in the right ways, and they're not being giving in the right ways, because we don't want to ride with a loose rein necessarily, but we also don't want to ride with a really tight rein. It's, sort of in the middle. It's just the weight of the rein, and that's what contact is, and that is the type of contact that a horse can take forward with the nose. If the contact is too tight, the nose has to duck behind the vertical, because there's no room for the nose to go anywhere else. So with this horse, I had to be pretty loose with the rein in the beginning so that she wouldn't duck behind the vertical, because she had been taught to do that. And so now she goes nice and forward, and so then I can take my light weight of the rein contact with her, and throughout this session, and you'll see that she pokes her nose out, and she's really able to stand up to the contact rather than just sort of dive behind it and sort of avoid it, evade it. So this is really nice. So this trot is really getting good. It's rhythmic, it's swinging, she's nice and deep in her stretch, she's nice and relaxed. You can see her ears flopping around, and again her tail is bouncing around and swishing from side to side. So this is all really, really loose for this horse. So you'll see that I'll start to begin to sit the trot. And how I begin that is by just sitting for a stride and then rising again. And then sitting again, and then rising back to the correct outside diagonal. And then I'll sit for 3 strides, and then rise again. And then I'll sit for 5 strides, and then 7 strides, and 9 strides, and we'll just go on like that on the even strides. And I do, the odd strides, and I do the odd strides so that I can end up back on the outside diagonal. But you really want to build up the sitting trot and not just suddenly start sitting on your horse, for the rest of the session. I work on everything to me is very gradual, very easy, and if things, I give her the opportunity to say no, that's difficult, and so if I sit for 5 strides and, her head comes up and she changes the rhythm and all these things change, then I know that I've sat too soon, and I should go back to rising, or I should go back to a walk, or go back to whatever, we had that nice relaxed rhythm in before. So that's why I build up that sitting like that. You saw I sat for 3 strides there, and that way, if it gives her the space to really show me how she's doing, and if she suddenly is all over the place, then I know that we need to take a step backwards, and that she can't sit for 7 strides or whatever the case might be. So there you see I sat, and the really nice thing is with sitting the trot, see I can sit there for 7 strides, but you see I don't bounce all around the saddle. A lot of riders will, and I used to bounce all over the saddle, and that's because I was sitting on a very hollow horse, and when you sit on a hollow horse, you bounce all over the saddle because you're sitting in a hole, and so you don't have anything stable underneath you to sit on. And so since the back isn't lifting you up, you're kind of all over the place, and it gets really uncomfortable to sit like that. So I used to hate sitting the trot, and and it's cruel to the horse and to the rider. It's bad on both of our hips and then our backs. So I always wait for my horse to finally be lifting in their back, have a really nice swinging trot, before, again, I just sit for a stride or 3 or 5 or whatever. And then that way I can see if my horse can lift me into the sitting trot. And then that way I can keep my hips and my spine nice and loose, just like she's doing, in order to lift me up. So that's how we begin the sitting trot, and we come back to a really nice walk. Look at how really beautiful and forward this walk is. It really looks like she's going somewhere in this walk. Whereas if you compare it back to the walk that we had in the work in hand, you can see that this walk is much, much different and much more forward and loose. And that's the whole thing. As you ride, it shouldn't be, like you ride and then all of the good work that you just did in the lunge starts to slowly disintegrate. The horse's movement should actually continue to progress and get better as you ride, rather than your riding sort of taking away from all the muscle you built up in the lunge work you just did right before riding. So you can see here that the riding is really improving her movement. She's really starting to take that nice big stride that she can here today. And so that's really what I'm looking for when I ride a horse, is that their movement is actually always improving, rather than not improving. I can't think of the word for that right now, but I don't want for her gaits to be degenerating. So you can see that this is really sort of the best walk that she gets to today, and that's the walk under saddle, which is how it should be. It should be, that your horse is warmed up on the lunge and they don't quite get to quite just their best on the lunge line, and then you get on and ride them, and you can really bring out the best in them. And that's what riders should do. Riders should bring out horses' best movement rather than take away from their best movement. The whole point to me of Art2Ride is to allow for the horse to move in their best way. I mean, that's the entire point, is to encourage and influence and improve the horse towards moving optimally, and such that it's very easy to lift us riders up and to move better and better all the time. So that's what I really love about this work, and this horse is a really good example of all of that in motion, quite literally. So I very much enjoy riding this horse. Nowadays, I ride her probably about 3 times a week, and then lunge her the other 2 or 3 days a week. So she's really become very enjoyable, and you can see just how long she looks. She looks very long and hardly like an Arab, really. Which, you can turn any horse and turn them into a dressage horse. It doesn't have to be some fancy $1 million warm blood. It can be some little, 16-year-old Arab, say. So dressage should really be good for any horse with any conformation, with any types of injuries. They should all be able to improve. And again, it takes time. This type of walk does not happen overnight for this horse. Like I said, the walk has always been very difficult for her. So, this is just under a year of work for her. So, you can imagine what she's going to be like in 2 years of Art2Ride work. She's going to look really, really good. and really, really loose. So here we get started again in the trot, and you can see we have a little bit of difficulty steering in the beginning, and that happens. It's, that's why I can't expect perfection with every single stride. I have to sort of just prepare the horse as best I can to move in their best way, and then find my own balance up there as a rider, rather than focusing on my horse being balanced. I have to be balanced before my horse is going to be balanced. It's just, it's hard to, imagine having a backpack on one of your shoulders and trying to run around with it. It's, you have to have your backpack balanced on your back before you can balance. So, I try to be a nice balanced backpack up there. And then that way there, my horse can balance. You can see she's really starting to thrust forward there. And again, the steering can be a little bit difficult. It's really hard to bend through the back for a horse, especially one that's stiff. So she has to really loosen up her circles. And so she, we always try to make these really nice wide circles. This horse used to really like to go in really tiny little circles because it's easier to just run around in a small circle than to actually bend through your back on a large circle. So, so you can see she's starting to develop a little bit of her bend. That's sort of one of the last things to really develop with this horse. So, so again, I just take my time, making nice, wide, big circles, so that I'm not asking her for this huge amount of bend. So that I'm only asking her work that she's capable of. If she can't do it, there's no point in me asking, because we're just gonna get mad at each other. So we just make nice big circles, and you can see she's starting to develop a rhythm, a swing here, and really nice and consistent in her stretch and in her body and in her rhythm. And so again, I'll start to sit the trot by adding a single stride, and then I'll sit for 3 strides, like there I sat 1. And you can see she's really swinging nicely. And really, if I'm sitting the trot correctly, actually you shouldn't notice. And if I hadn't mentioned to you that I was sitting the trot today, you hopefully wouldn't notice that I was sitting the trot at any moment, because the horse doesn't change. If the horse changes in the sitting trot, then it's not time to sit. And so, this is the other thing about really good work, is that a lot of times horses will start having bowel movements all of a sudden. And that's because they are using their abdominals that are massaging the gut, and so therefore they get their intestinal tracts moving, and they can eliminate all that waste out of their bodies, which is really great. So I always allow for my horse to relieve themselves in whatever way they need to do that. Sometimes really funky tics will start coming out in horses, where they have these really strange behavioral sort of things. This horse used to shake a lot. She would shake her head around a whole lot. And again, that's all stuff I allow for that, because that's just her working out, the kinks and things out of her body. And you can see nowadays she rarely even shakes, even thinks about flicking an ear, hardly. So this work really helps to loosen the horses up and really get their entire systems, not just their musculatory systems, but, respiratory system, circulatory system, digestive system. All these systems inside the horses are all also adjusting, just like the muscular systems are. And so we have to allow for all of that. We can't get mad at our horse for wanting to stop and poop every 5 seconds. This horse used to do that. She'd just drop one little nugget, and, it could get kind of frustrating when you're trotting around and she has to stop and, make a deposit. And so you can see there, that was really nice, because you don't see me bouncing all around the saddle. I'm really able to just sit there and softly sort of swing along with her stride. And again, you notice that the the horse doesn't change her stride when I sit. So that's exactly what we were looking for. And again, if she started changing the stride, if she started speeding up or started going slower or lifted her head or anything changed about her stride, I would just rise to the trot again or come back to the walk. You know, it might just mean that we need to take a couple steps backwards, and that's all fine. And, you know, I don't push past, I think maybe 7 strides today, because I want to push and see where I can get to, but see, that was really nice and soft. But I don't want to overdo it, so just because she can do it for 7 strides doesn't mean I'm going to always go for 9 strides and then 11 strides, or whatever it might be, or stop counting strides, because at that point, you know, it's kind of hard to keep track. But yeah, I'm just gonna take it easy and really just see what I can get to, just in the simple way and in an easy way, and then just not really push beyond that. And maybe tomorrow I'll push beyond that, or maybe, you know, it might not be until next month that I'll start sitting 9 strides or whatever. You know, to me, everything should always be easy, and if it's not easy, then go backwards, and just don't set. I just don't want to set myself up for frustration ever, for me or the horse. And then in that way, you know, we can always enjoy riding together. Or she can enjoy carrying me and I can enjoy riding her. So that's really what I love about this work. Is that you can push, but you also, you know, you're responsible for being fair. As a rider, you have to really be thinking about you know, planning ahead for what your horse can do and not just asking for the most thing. And then that way the training is going to be a little bit more linear, and you're going to be able to ask for more and more, you know, as you continue, rather than expecting more. And then that way I get to be surprised when my horse I can sit for 5 strides or whatever on my horse, and I get to be really pleasantly surprised and excited when that happens, rather than, you know, expecting her to be able to do that and then I'm frustrated when she can't. So I always just take it really nice and easy and slow and rhythmic and effortless, and that's what I love. So here we come back down to the walk nice and slowly. She, again, doesn't really love to walk, so we take our time in that transition. I don't know if you can see me smiling there, but I am super happy with this ride. Good girl. You know, and it becomes the simple things. You know, it's not always about, you know, the biggest, hugest, greatest thing that the horse can do. It's just the littlest, greatest, best thing that the horse can do, and that really can just make you so happy. At least for me as a rider, I just love the little things that I take the time to prepare my horse to be able to do. It's so beautiful when you get to experience your horse's best work almost every day. And the bad days become fewer and fewer, the frustrating days become fewer and fewer, and the days like this, of relaxation and just partnership and my horse being able to say, yes, I can do that, you know, those days become more and more, and that's what I love about Art2Ride, and why I train all horses that I work with in this system, because it's a yes system instead of a no system. And that to me is just beautiful. I love being able to tell horses yes instead of no. It's really super rewarding, because then you get days like these where you can just walk and flow, and you can see this is a nice slow but steady, active walk for this horse. Oops, and I did something weird there, I don't know. But again, you know, as riders we can do weird stuff, and we can just stretch our horses back out and they forgive us for it. You know, it's nothing becomes a big deal. And that's really the beauty of this system. So I absolutely love it. I would never ride a horse a different way. So there you can see she really starts to push forward, and she gets a little bit tired. This ride is about 25 minutes, I think, which is about the maximum. You know, I wouldn't ride more than half an hour, probably. So, we don't want to work our horses for too long, even if they are over their backs the whole time. To me, less is more. So she starts to get a little bit tired. You can see she's kind of rushing her walk just a little bit there as she gets tired. So I just want to try to slow her down a little and just push for that last little bit of an active, deep, slow step in the walk. And then once she gives me that last little bit right there, yep, then is when I stop and I'll get off. So again, I don't push too hard, but we just try to make everything as easy as possible. So that was our session, and we'll see you next time.